Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
Welcome, friends, it's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to MovieFilm. This is episode 278, brought to you by Mr. Boy Productions. I am Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Dude, you know, this is a cliche at this point, but how is it that 2023 is almost over?
I know. I still, when I'm having to write the date for something, have to remind myself, like, the 2023. Yeah, and we're already, like you said, we're almost on our way out. I can't believe it.
I still sign my checks 1984, which is weird because I didn't even have checkbook in 1984.
I mean, that's the sort of repeated joke you see a lot online where people are like, 20 years ago wasn't the 90s. Actually, wait, it kind of was. But you know what I'm saying?
No, 20 years ago was not the 90s. It was
not quite. Yeah. Or it wasn't like 1993 or something.
That's right.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's in my class I show, in my public speaking class, I show a video of myself delivering a speech.
Oh.
And I'm like, here's a video from a previous class. Let's critique it, and then I usually be like, oh, and by the way, that was me. Haha. And I realized that video is now 25 years old.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. That's kind of fun and bold of you, honestly, to put yourself out there like that. I mean, do the students, they recognize you right away? Like, is it sort of, you don't tell them?
I don't tell them. So there's usually a few who have a hunch.
Yeah.
And then, there's a few who pick it up, a few who are totally oblivious, Because back then, I mean, Brian, we're talking like back when you and I first met, so my hair looked very different, and my style of dress looked very different.
Well, going along with what we were saying earlier about time feeling weird, I mean, that's the thing too, where I feel like, oh, I know what I look like. Like I've always looked like, but sometimes you see yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh wait, that isn't the me I have in my head. Yeah. So like for me, it'd be so easy to recognize you, but for your students, maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah. So that's always fun, but yeah, it's definitely, and this is, by the way, this is in Marco's class.
Mm-hmm. I assume, yeah.
You can hear Marco, for those of you listening, Marco Bonassi was our teacher, Brian and I both at College of DuPage, and really kind of an influential figure for the both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can hear his voice like, okay, we're going to do this, and I'm going to let you know when time is up or whatever. And he just retired in the last year.
Yeah. Wild.
When I was back in Chicago, I met him for breakfast, and I was like, as long as I show this video, like, your class will live on, Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little bit longer, that little, his stay in the world of academia gets to be a little bit longer.
Yeah. I mean, his influence, continues. It persists. It's got to feel good.
And I hope some student I've had in the last 20 or whatever 18 years will carry on some of what I've taught, and it kind of keeps that trajectory going.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I have to imagine.
Just something, it's like Coco, just somebody to remember me a little bit longer. Remember Marco?
Make me cry. Yeah,
dude, you'll appreciate this. I saw this video on YouTube. It's called I forget exactly, but I think it's called Time Lapse to the End of Time, or something to that effect.
Okay.
And it's basically somebody put together this thing. It's like a half hour long, and it's basically an exponential progression from now, or like 2019, something like that, until like what'll happen at the end of the universe,
Okay.
based on just whatever our best knowledge is about how, entropy and things like that. So time is advancing in this video at an exponential rate until you reach, trillions and trillions and trillions of years in the future, and everything ends. Okay.
Okay.
So you're watching this video, and by minute 3.5, our solar system doesn't exist anymore. And there's still like 26 minutes left.
Oh, so what are we focusing on then for the rest of that video?
It's just the stars die out, and then they turn into black holes, and then those turn into this and that, and eventually nothing is left. But you want to talk about the most soothing existential crisis you could ask for.
Yeah.
That was me watching this thing. It ends. You're captivated because it's just this amazing thing. The way in which this is all depicted, and then it ends, and you just kind of sit there in quiet contemplation and realize you don't matter even a little bit. You're just a mote in a god's eye.
Wow.
So check that out. You might.
Yeah.
But anyway, what have you seen lately?
Well, speaking of things that I guess are just specks on the timeline of history, I watched a documentary about Milli Vanilli.
Wow, that feels so appropriate.
I'm just getting like so reflective and thinking about what matters and what doesn't matter. It's just funny that this like documentary about Milli Vanilli. Which, with that in mind, I wonder if many of your students would even know who that is.
Doubtful.
I was wondering that, as I was watching it. I mean, is this truly just like lost to time? Because for a long time, to explain what it is, Milli Vanilli was this pop group in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And they had this huge scandal where, it was like these two really good looking lead singers, and they had these huge hits. They sold millions, like 8 million records. I mean, they blew up. And then all of a sudden it was revealed that they weren't actually the singers. Like they were literally just actors, like puppets, dancing on stage, lip syncing to music that other people had recorded. Like they were just facade. And it became this huge scandal, and people really went hard on these guys. And they were obviously like a punchline, but there was just this almost like rage directed toward them. And it persisted for a long time. Milli Vanilli was like shorthand, like people knew who they were.
Brian, when you think about it, they were kind of like the Charles Van Doren of their time, like the quiz show scandal of the 50s.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's funny because, I remember it, and I'm sure I laughed at all the jokes and whatever, but
they were people.
And I feel like not enough, but I do feel like we've gotten a little bit better, or we're crawling toward getting a little bit better about realizing that celebrities are human beings too. Especially with this Britney Spears autobiography that's out now. We look back on how she was treated, or Amy Winehouse, and you just like go, what were people, what was society thinking, like treating these people this way? And likewise with Milli Vanilli, it's like, man, there's this press conference they show in there, and the journalists are like mad. And you're like, dude, it really doesn't matter. Like, this doesn't matter. You could feel like an idiot if you want.
Having watched a 30-minute video about the time lapse to the end of time, let me assure you, Brian, it does not matter.
Yeah. And anyway, so this documentary,
and one of them committed suicide, I believe.
That's what it seems like. It was like a pills and alcohol situation, but he was an addict, and he was, according to the documentary, living in a crack house for a while. So he definitely self-destructed. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
And it's horrifying.
That was how long after the fall?
Not long. Maybe a couple years.
Okay.
But they sort of split up, and one of them tried to have like a serious music career, and the other one spiraled. And But I think if you remember this, like have any interest in this at all, and like I've said, with these OJ things and the Monica Lewinsky things, I mean, all the things that I remember from history from when I was young, I am interested in seeing these things re-examined and speaking to the people who were involved. And I found it to be, it's only an hour and 45 minutes. Mercifully, it's not a 3 episode
another mini
series. Yeah, no, it's all it needs to be. You kind of know the whole story, but it is, there's interviews with people who were involved, including the one remaining living member, and and there's a lot of footage. And also, surprisingly, you remember there's the sort of famous incident where they were performing and their vocals started skipping.
Skipping, that's right.
And so
that's when the jig was up, so to speak.
See, and that's what everybody remembers, and that's what I remembered. But no, like they went beyond that, and I almost wish the documentary had dug more into that, because that was on some sort of like MTV traveling tour, and they were really embarrassed by it. But that was before they won their Grammy. So I kind of wish they had dug into that a little bit more, because I mean, in the internet age now, I mean, that would have been when it was all over. But maybe at that point they could just sort of push past that. Sure. But
remember the Ashley Simpson thing like 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Very similar, right?
Yeah. On SNL, she got caught lip syncing, and it was very awkward, and she didn't know what to do, and she just stopped. And that's right. They went to commercial. It was I can't even watch the clip now. It's so uncomfortable.
So this Milli Vanilli thing, where did you say it's streaming?
It's on Paramount Plus. And what I think the interesting thing that I didn't know about it is the guy who put this all together, a record producer. And this isn't the first time he's done this, where he's recorded music by other people and then hired actors to perform. So it's kind of interesting getting into that person and how sketchy they are. And he made $500 million off of them and got off scot-free.
Wow.
So
that whole incident inspired, I don't know if you were a Perfect Strangers viewer, but there was an episode involving fresh young Balky B.
I don't remember this.
It was the same thing. It was like this music producer sees Balky like dancing and singing. He's like, "Oh, you've got what I need for my act," and so he markets him as fresh young Balky B.
That is, I mean, there you go. I mean, it was, it pervaded pop culture, right?
Yeah, and then his voice is dubbed, and it was like a whole thing. And
wow.
And what's funny is I saw that first.
Oh, interesting.
And then later I heard about the Milli Vanilli thing. I was like, oh, okay, doing a little social commentary in a Perfect Stranger.
Yeah, like putting the truth in everybody's faces. Perfect Stranger.
Yeah, it was funny because the episode ends with like, there's like the press conference where Balky's gonna come out and meet the press, and he's like, I'm here to sing a song for the press, and here's my DJ MC Cousin, and it's Larry, and they. I don't know. I remember that.
This almost feels like a Simpsons joke parodying an episode of Perfect Strangers, like trying to parody what the '90s were like or something. Like, it's amazing. But just one more factoid that I thought was interesting that they don't really harp on a whole lot was the first. Was it girl? It's true. Like that was the first one. They hired these professional singers to sing it. They put it out as a single, but it's such a big hit. They need to do a whole album. So the next one is Blame It on the Rain. And they didn't even get the same singer back. It's a different singer.
Wow.
It's just wild. Like their two biggest hits, not even the same singers.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah. It's a crazy story, and it's very interesting. I found it very interesting. I think people from that generation will enjoy.
I want to check it out for sure. I definitely want to check it out.
Yeah. I just got to throw this out here super, super fast, but I rewatched Zodiac, David Fincher's Zodiac.
Oh, nice. Did you watch the director's cut?
Director's cut. Yep. Freaking masterpiece.
Amazing.
That movie is second for second. You cannot stop. You cannot look away. I absolutely loved it. I just had to throw it out there that if you haven't seen it or you hadn't seen it in a while, it is absolutely worth revisiting. So good.
Well, and I should mention that I just rewatched Dirty Harry, which is inspired by the events of the Zodiac killing.
Yeah, they touch on that in the movie.
And they go to the premiere or whatever in Zodiac, right?
Yeah, when he goes to the cop, he's just like, we should look into this, look into that. And he's like, they already made a movie about it. It's over. But so good. But
that movie, by the way, that was 2007.
yeah.
And so, like Robert Downey was like already on the upswing.
Yeah, sure.
Like Iron Man, right? That was kind of the neat thing to see, because like there was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I can't remember which was first, but between those two, you're like, at least me, I was like, man, I'm so happy to see Robert Downey back and doing great stuff.
Yep. Those might have been the same-ish year. I don't know, but yeah, he's just so effortless and so good.
Yeah.
But steering back toward the music tip, I'll just throw these out here. But I saw 2 concert films. I saw Stop Making Sense, which is a Talking Heads concert movie from like 1984, I want to say. And the main reason I was interested in this, I know the Talking Heads, but I can't say I love them or I'm a huge fan. Right. I know all their music. But like 20 years ago, I worked at a restaurant, and the manager was a huge movie guy. So he and I would talk movies all the time. And he said, have you ever seen Stop Making Sense? It's the best concert film of all time. And I was like, no. And I didn't even know how to find it. But it just always stuck in my head. Like, oh, okay, that's the best concert film of all time. And so A24 recently released it and did like a whole remaster of it, the sound, the visuals, and the whatever. And I saw it was in theaters. And I was like, oh, I really want to go catch it just on that recommendation. And it was actually
Jonathan. This is Jonathan Demme.
Jonathan Demme, yep. And when I went to the theater, it'd been playing for weeks, and I just wasn't able to catch it. And so I think it was like the last day. So I ran. I was like, all right, I got to go see this. I saw it like 4 PM. And I was in the theater by myself. And then this guy walks in, this older guy, and he goes, "A fellow boomer." And I was like, no. and then he got closer, and he goes, "Oh, wait, no, yeah, you're too young." And he's like, "Well, I saw this show back in the day, and like I'm just so excited." He's like, "I drove all the way up. I live up in the valley." He's like, "I drove up from West Hollywood. This is the only place that was playing it." And I was like, "Oh, great." So we watched the show, and dude, highly recommend this. Even if you aren't a fan of Talking Heads, the music is infectious. It's a whole vibe. Like it's like a visually considered concert. There's just all this like choreography, and it starts with just him and an acoustic guitar. And then they bring out a bass player, and then like a whole drum thing, and then a percussion. And there's all this. It is wild. And by the last song, I felt like charged up. I was like really charged up with the music and the thing, and it ended. And I was so glad I caught it. So I'm sorry to bring it up now that it's not in theaters, but I would recommend it. It is a super exhilarating experience. And when it ended, what was so nice was the guy was like on cloud 9, and he and I walked out together, and he was like, "Man, I feel like I'm 25 again." And I was so happy that I got to like sort of have that sort of context, even, with the experience walking out with him, and he was so excited about it. So I highly recommend Stop Making Sense.
Wow. I love that story.
Me too. I was so happy that it would have been one thing to watch it and think it was great, but to have someone who was there and get to like relive it and be so excited about it, really, I was really happy to have that experience.
Nice.
Yeah. But then, I mean, so going from the best concert film of all time to the most profitable concert film of all time.
So you're just bouncing between generations, I feel like.
Yeah, that's kind of true, isn't it?
You're Dr. Sam Beckett, quantum leaping.
Excuse me. Sorry, I was sick. I still have a little bit of cough. But yes, I'm just jumping from experience to experience and trying to see everyone around
hoping
me.
Each time the next leap will be the one that takes you home.
What's the Nirvana concert coming? Yeah, like someday I'll make it. Someday I'll make it there. But I saw the Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert. And this was also sort of a special experience where it was a friend of ours who was a huge Swiftie. Mm-hmm. It was sort of a birthday present for her. So we surprised her at the theater. We wore T-shirts that said Stacy's version on them because her name's Stacy. And we had like the friendship bracelets, and like we made it like a whole thing. And she was totally surprised. It was such a great, experience just for that. But then going in the theater, It was a blast, man. Like it was, people were up dancing. Some kids on the side were actually screaming lyrics back at the screen. We had like, and it was all ages. I mean, there were these younger girls behind us. I want to say probably like junior high, early high school, and their mom was with them. And her mom was saying to us, like, I want to hear you singing. So it was really fun. Our friend was up dancing in the aisles. Like it was totally fun. And I had really wanted to see this because this tour is such a phenomenon at the moment that when I was hearing from people who had seen it, I mean, I was feeling a little FOMO. Like it just sounds like an experience, like an event. And I was kind of curious what that was. So as opposed to paying several $100s or thousands of dollars, like getting to see it for like $20, it was cool to see what it was all about. And I know like a handful of her songs, but not a ton of them. And I mean, I have to say, like, song 1, 2, 3, 4, my brother and I leaned over to each other and he was like, does she have a bad song? Like all of them were like good. So I think for people who are curious or missed the show or just want to see what she's all about, like.
Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
It's like a nice sampling, honestly, of her music because she goes through every era, plays like her biggest hits, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like now I get why people are such big fans.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Hey, look, a few weeks ago when we were talking about this, and I mentioned I was like, oh, my wife and I aren't really Swifties, and Amina, apparently she listens to the show. She's like, hey, I heard you tell Brian I'm not a Swiftie. Why'd you say that?
Oh, really?
I'm like, 'cause you're not. Like, name one song, So I think this might be like an excuse for her to actually go out and watch the movie without me, because I feel like I'm going to be in full get off my lawn mode.
It's nice too. I mean, it's not to the degree of the Talking Heads in terms of, well, I know maybe it is. I was in a different way. There's a sort of more of a funky mode and artistic, art schooly sort of vibe, but like, her different eras have sets, like in moods and choreography, and it was. I recommend it. I mean, I don't think you're not going to enjoy it. Like you might not listen to it, when on the ride home, but like all her songs are catchy. The experience is it's a spectacle. I think she will definitely enjoy it. Like I recommend it. I definitely recommend it.
Here's what I'm looking forward to. When they re-release this movie in 40 years, you'll be there. Yes. And somebody will see you there and you'll be like, I feel like I'm 45 again.
Yeah, that's you know what? I guarantee it. Like this audience now who's going to see this, that will be them. They'll be in there and be like, Gen Z? Or like, or more like millennial, probably millennial. It'd be like, no, I'm Generation R, and I just was curious, like. Yeah, I guarantee it. That's gonna happen.
Wow. All right.
But lastly,
real quick, before you get to your thing, while we're talking about stuff getting re-released, I wanted to mention I watched Back to the Future for Back to the Future Day.
Yes, tell me about that. I saw that. I didn't realize it was coming. I hadn't seen any advertising or anything.
Yeah, well, so first of all, October 21st has been deemed Back to the Future Day. Mm-hmm. I think because of the date in Back to the Future 2, right?
Right, October 21st, 2015.
However, now that it's all in the past, why isn't October 26th Back to the Future Day? Because that's the date in the first one.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it started with the whole 2015 celebrations.
And it just stuck?
Yeah, that might be.
In my opinion, then they should have put Back to the Future 2 in the theater. But anyway, regardless.
Oh, I love that. If they put all three.
That would make sense, right? But yeah, I saw that they were putting it out in the theater again. It was a one night only thing. And I was like, well, I want to take advantage of this. So I I reserved seats for my whole family, which in hindsight was a lot more expensive than I would have liked.
Wow. Yeah, I bet.
It's 7 people. I'm like, okay, well, not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even AMC A-list. That's the other thing. It wasn't covered by that thing. But regardless, I was like, I've gotten to see Back to the Future twice in the theater. Once, the first time was 13 years ago with you and Sean for the 25th anniversary.
Yep.
And then a couple years back, I went with Hamza and Miku, and they were like little, right? So they actually don't remember having gone to see it.
Oh, wow.
In the theater. But this time I was like, everybody's seen it. But again, you know this, there's just something about watching it on the big screen.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
God, I mean, this actually, I would say I've actually seen it 3 times before this because I watched it with you at your place of work in the big screening room.
Yeah, that was really fun. Oh,
I considered that a theatrical viewing.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. So I'm telling you, man, this is just, anybody listening to this is like, no, duh, really, Back to the Future is great. But no, folks, this movie's really great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a perfect movie. I mean, just in terms of, I was thinking about how it's amazing. I looked it up at my local theater when it was playing, and it was pretty much sold out, like almost literally sold out. And I thought, wow, I mean, so few movies, endure to that degree, and you still have, Marty being a popular Halloween costumer, everyone knowing, exactly how he dresses. It's just, it's amazing the longevity that the relevance of that movie has had.
Yeah.
Oh, I just bumped my mic. What was the theater experience like? I mean, were people, I every time I've seen it in the theater, it to my delight, everybody always cheers when when George knocks out Biff.
Yeah, same. And laughing at all the moments, even though you have to imagine this is a crowd of people who've mostly seen it already.
Right, sure.
But all the big laugh lines,
Yep.
And it was fun because the age range in my kids is such that like my older ones have really just been ensconced in this trilogy. I mean, since they were little, but like the younger ones, not as much.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of like my daughter, she's 6. My youngest son, he's going to be 10. So they know it, of course. I mean, I've got Doc and Marty Hot Toys in my cave, and so they know the milieu, but they don't know the specifics of the films.
Yeah,
and so I'm actually looking forward to keep to getting 2 and 3 and at some point.
Oh, that's so fun! Yeah, you can continue it with them. Yeah. I saw it when I was 5, so it's like it was very formative.
You saw it for the first time.
For the first time, yeah, it was 1985. It was one of my first movies in the theater. It's so cool to think for your kids, it's like can have a similar experience.
I mean, in 2010, which was the 25th anniversary, Hamza was 3, right?
Wow.
And I have a picture of him with I had this big DeLorean toy, and he's just holding holding onto this DeLorean, and that's like, just from the time he was a little kid,
mm-hmm.
and just grown up in it. And we've talked about this before, how it truly is timeless, where it doesn't matter about the dates.
Yeah.
It's a movie that even this many years removed, you're just like, you can relate to it,
That was such a smart choice, wasn't it? Where 1985 is really just more like a stick pin for you for the story, where they don't just go into like the details of the time, like tape cassettes, like it just is, which is really, really smart. Yeah.
But what else have you seen, Brian?
Well, I have to mention this, and it's almost Halloween. How appropriate. I can bring up, I watched a horror movie, which I don't do often, but I don't know how this got into my mind, but recently I was thinking about the fact that there is a Psycho 2. like there's a sequel to Psycho. And
there's a few
watch
sequels to Psycho.
Yes. But just Psycho 2. Like I couldn't almost like wrap my head around that. Like I've seen Psycho a handful of times, and I was like, "What next? Like what happens next? So I queued it up. I had to know.
I'm so interested to hear your thoughts on this.
You know, it came out in 1983 and it is post
years.
Yeah. Well, and I thought like, I don't know if we've brought that up when we talk about like legacy sequels, right? Like where how, a long decades have passed and then you get a direct sequel with the same actors involved. But I kind of enjoyed it.
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's a great movie.
It's you want to immediately throw up an asterisk and say, look, it's not the original. It's not Hitchcock. It's not, whatever. Like it's a weird mishmash of being sort of that creepy thriller thing that the first one does, but also we are post Friday the 13th.
Yes.
So they feel this need. Like there's a person who gets stabbed in the head. And in the first one, it's all like impressionistic and maybe worse for it because it's so like, it's in your mind. But in this one, literally this person gets stabbed and it cuts to this like shot of her head and like the knife went like, bleh, like right through the back of her neck. And I had to laugh. I was like, 1983. It takes away like maybe a little of the dignity of it all, but
and it's kind of a shock given the character who it happens to.
Absolutely. I mean, and that I'm sort of laughing because I feel like that, speaking of like dating it, almost like dates it a little bit or takes away a little bit of its class or something. Yeah. But like, I gotta say, it was really interesting seeing Anthony Perkins again, literally aged what he is supposed to be in the story.
Yeah.
So it's all these years later.
He is horrific in this movie.
He is so unnerving.
Yeah.
It's just, he's so uncomfortable in his own skin and it just really, really sells that character. And so you don't know what his motives are. And he's meeting people in town. Some people don't know who he is seemingly. And like, I don't know if I trust him. The movie doesn't tell me if I should trust him. And there's a new mystery afoot. And I found myself intrigued by it, but like, oh yeah, this is okay. And then midway through where I was like, oh, I don't know what's going on. I found myself like, well, I gotta know. I'm into this. I am very invested in this. And there's twists and turns. And, I mean, I think you and I we didn't really talk about it, but we were saying it's sort of the Jaws 2 of that series, which is like, it's not a terrible movie. It's not Jaws, but it's not bad. It's not bad. So I
said to you, I put it in the bucket of good enough part twos that didn't need to exist.
100%. You don't need to see this movie, but if you're curious like me, like to see the story, like where it goes next, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not Psycho. It's not Psycho, but it's
feel like that.
Yeah, I was like, that is an interesting take. That's an interesting story to continue it.
I think a couple things about Psycho 2, which I revisited relatively recently, not knowing you were going to see it in the last year or so.
Oh, wow.
Richard Franklin, who directed it, I think he does a so much better job of evoking Hitchcock than Gus Van Sant did by trying to do a shot-for-shot remake of Hitchcock.
Sure. Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, in 1998 or I think it was 98, 99, they put out a remake of Psycho, which is terrible. And even though it's the exact same movie, it's 100% not the same movie.
Yeah, and I mean not just a remake, like shot for shot.
Yeah,
like almost like it's an experiment. Like let's literally remake Psycho.
Yeah,
exactly the same. And I saw it. I don't remember a whole lot about it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't work, and I think part of it, I think Vince Vaughn is just miscast. But I think the reason Psycho 2 works, for me at least, is that you get Anthony Perkins back, but it's not just, it's not Robert Englund in another Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, and let's see who he's going to kill, Like, they could have done that.
Yep.
And instead, they put us in Norman's shoes to some extent, and I don't know about you, but I watch it and I'm like, I'm rooting for Norman to not be what sort of fate has written for him.
100%. And I had a debate with myself as I was watching it, like, yeah, but he killed a lot of people, like,
Right. Right.
but the movie is, it's perfectly well put. It puts you sort of in his shoes, and I'm rooting for him to be okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they were first, in the I think it was the late 70s, early 80s, Robert Bloch wrote a sequel to the novel. And that's the novel. The novel sequel was a response to all the slasher movies, and that the plot of the novel involved like Norman Bates escapes from prison or whatever he is, and he heads to Hollywood to kill people who are making slasher movies. And I'm like, well, that sounds awful. Right?
That does sound awful. Yeah.
Right? And so thankfully, Universal, who had no designs on making a sequel, were like, well, no, we're not doing that. But it sort of lit the fuse a little bit of like, well, what could be done? What would be interesting? And I think obviously getting Perkins on board was essential.
Yeah.
But it allows for something. I mean, it's a very much a product of the 80s slasher boom, but it's not of a piece with those movies.
Totally. You can sense that they felt like they needed to have a little bit of that voice in there for the young audience, it's not at all what the movie really is.
Yeah. And Dennis Franz, what a freaking dirtbag he is in that.
Yes, that was fun seeing him in there. He's such a jerk. And Meg Tilly, she's kind of like awkward at first, but then it just really worked. I totally I really enjoyed her in this movie.
Yeah, they kept going. They made two more. The third one was directed by Anthony Perkins,
right?
And I think he's a good director. I don't think we needed to keep going,
Mm-hmm.
But my memories of Psycho 3 are of being a little kid and seeing the TV spots for it, and definitely being sort of like that was my first exposure to Psycho, period, was the TV spots for Psycho 3. And it's Perkins, going down some steps, and you hear like his mother's voiceover, like, Norman, right, where are you? Or something like that. Yeah. And it's so like just part of my childhood. Like I remember those trailers. So not even trailer, TV spots.
Right.
But yeah, I would say you're fine not continuing.
Yeah, I think I went on Wikipedia and looked up 3 and 4. It's funny, I don't even remember if I did, but I think I did, just to see what they were. But it's funny though, because if you think about it, there's 4 Psychos.
Yep.
And there's a lot of jokes made about Jaws, like everybody knows Jaws and that stands on its own, but it's like all the Jaws sequels or all the Rocky sequels, that used to be sort of a punchline, but you don't hear that about Psycho. It's like they're almost forgotten.
That's a good point. Well, I think that the fourth one, kind of leaves Norman in a good place. Like he's maybe beaten his mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is kind of like, if one were interested, like, yeah, there's kind of an arc there,
Yeah.
And you can be done with it. That said, I remember on our show many moons ago when we talked about the then upcoming Bates Motel TV show.
Yeah.
And I remember something to the effect of me being like, who the hell wants to watch, 5 years of young Norman Bates or whatever. And I have to say, I was wrong. I didn't watch the show religiously, but my wife did. And so I would dip in. You know what? It was a good show.
I'm kind of enjoying this universe at the moment and sort of sad that 3 and 4 aren't good. So maybe I'll take a peek at that. For the final season, whichever one that was, they did their version of Psycho. That's clever.
But think of it like a multiverse version,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Rihanna is Marilyn Crane in that.
How fun.
Yeah. Okay. So might be worth checking out. What's his name? The good doctor. What's the guy's name?
Yeah.
He's Norman Bates. He's pretty good in it.
I remember. I can see that. Yeah, and Vera Farmiga was the mom, right?
Vera Farmiga. She's Norma. Yeah.
Yeah. I can picture all the advertising.
There. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. My wife really liked it. It was funny though because she had not seen Psycho.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I remember because she was kind of going through it. I was like, listen, before you watch the last season, we're going to watch Psycho. I want you to see the real version first.
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
she was able to sort of appreciate the ways in which it does something different.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. That show had really not been on my radar, so put it on the list.
Yeah, you know what? Mea culpa. I was wrong. I think it turned out better than I would have expected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the kid is great. I mean, like, he really evokes Anthony Perkins in a lot of subtle ways.
Right.
Here's hoping they do a remake of The Black Hole where he gets to be, shish kebabbed by Maximilian just to square the circle.
Dude, I think I mentioned that I rewatched that not long ago. I am so weirdly drawn to that movie. It's not good. I don't know why. But maybe because it hit me when I was really young. It was like one of the first VHSs I think we rented from the video store.
Yeah.
I'm just endeared to it, but I would love to see a remake.
I mean, what's his name? Joe Kosinski had been talking about doing one.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, man, right on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, after I think Tron was sort of like a tepid sort of response from people.
Yeah.
And if Tron doesn't hit, I mean, is the Black Hole going to hit? So I can sort of see why Disney would be like, yeah, nah. but
he's got the juice now.
That's true. Or at least make it like a Disney Plus movie or something. I mean, it could be really cool.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just speaking of Black Hole, I told you, right? I'm just yay close to the finish line on Breaking Bad, and I just watched the next to last episode, and Robert Forster is in that.
Yeah, that's right. He's the guy who makes people disappear.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have one episode left.
Holy cow,
I know.
dude! And it's just you and your oldest, right?
Yeah, me and Hamza, and he was like, "Oh, are we going to watch Better Call Saul next?" And I said, "Yes, I want to. However, I need a breather from this universe." That was what I realized, because I watched it 10 years ago, and so I was hankering to get back to it. But I'm like, man, I can't live in this world.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I was like, I want to watch the El Camino movie.
Yeah.
And then kind of, put a lid on it for a little while, and then go back into Better Call Saul.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But hey, let's take a short break. We sure covered a lot of ground. We did some bouncing across the decades.
Yeah, we really did.
Sam Beckett style. Let's take a short break. Come back. We got some listener letters to talk through.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses, so don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses, so don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And we are back. And hey, Brian, boy, we got a whole slew of listener letters in the last couple of weeks that I wanted to get us caught up on.
I love it.
Now, you mentioned seeing a boomer at Taylor Swift who reached out to you in plaintive fashion before realizing you were not a boomer.
Well, that was Stop Making Sense.
That was Stop Making. Oh, that's right. Stop Making Sense.
Yeah. But yes.
That person might be comforted by this tweet that we got from Maddie Feck in response to our In the Line of Fire commentary.
Okay.
where he says, "You might be Gen X, but you give boomer energy." What a hilarious pick for a commentary track. To which I say hilarious or correct. And this is also on Twitter from Pud333. Says, not a lot of podcasts would even know about the 30th anniversary of Check's Notes in the Line of Fire. Seriously, though, this podcast rules. So thank you for that.
Oh, man, that's great. That's great. I was surprised. We got a lot of responses to that one.
Yeah, a lot of responses in the vein of, huh?
Yeah, I know. Well, I was surprised, and I hope I'm not stepping on whatever's coming next, but some people saying they were going to check it out now because of it, which I thought was pretty cool.
Man, that's super cool. Alex Naom on Twitter said, I've never seen it, but I will now.
Yeah.
Which, that's just nuts. And actually, and Dan Kiedis messaged me on Instagram. He says, just finished the commentary track for In the Line of Fire, despite the fact that I never actually saw the film. Made me want to watch it, though. It also prompted me to watch The Unforgiven, a film I've bought on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K. Yet still never seen all the way through, which, there you go. You got a good movie waiting if you haven't seen that. But here's something funny that Dan said. Speaking of 90s thrillers, I recently rewatched Copycat. Remember that one? With Sigourney Weaver, Holly Hunter, and Dylan McDermott / Dermot Mulroney. Delete as appropriate. And when we were recording our episode, it's Dermot Mulroney, by the way, but when we were recording, I was joking about how, the confusion between Dylan McDermott and Dermot Mulroney and watching In the Line of Fire was my first exposure to the doomed partner trope.
Yes.
And I remember watching Copycat like a year later and liking Dermot Mulroney as Holly Hunter's partner and being like, oh, he gonna die.
Right.
And die he does. So Dylan McDermott and Dermot Mulroney have both been the doomed partners.
That you got to pay your dues, I guess.
There's the universe is cycling towards entropy. That's what that means.
Yeah.
Speaking of Dan Kiedis, here was a message he had sent in regards to our last regular show where we talked about the creator, the film The Creator, not the creator, like not God.
Not God, creator of all things.
It's a different podcast.
Yeah.
He says, so sorry for yet another late reply. It was very interested to listen to your review of The Creator, not least because it features perhaps one of the deepest Simpsons cuts yet. I'm kind of wondering what that Simpsons cut is. Yeah, I'm going to have to dig into that. He says, I really loved the film. Been a huge fan of Gareth Edwards since Monsters. I think perhaps his greatest strength is making huge scale action feel personal and immediate. Mm-hmm. Unlike you guys, I felt a lot more emotionally invested, and I feel like this film really hits different in light of what's currently going on in Gaza. The indiscriminate use of force and the sense of othering to justify it completes the loop between our real history and this fictional future. And, that's kind of an interesting thought because obviously when the film was released, what's going on right now in the Middle East had not flared up to this extent. Mm-hmm. So it's weird how like real world context adds nuance to a film that was made without that context, without that specific context.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, it's funny because my son, who I went to watch The Creator with, he liked it more than me. He was like, you didn't like it? I was like, no, I did like it. And here's, but he's like, no, I loved it. So he really liked it.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, that's great.
Yeah.
So to some extent, these varied reactions are gratifying because it kind of does make me want to revisit the movie.
Me too. Me too.
Even though I had said initially, I was like, I'm not in a hurry to rewatch it,
and I wonder if that can come also from we watch so much stuff.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And so we sometimes get a little used to certain ideas, or we're like, oh, this feels familiar. I think I know where this is going. And like we apply all those things that are kind of unfair to what's happening in front of us. And as it stands, I'm not changing my opinion on it. I mean, I think we were saying it's like a thumbs up with an asterisk kind of movie, but yeah, I love that. I love the people going into it with a different perspective and getting something different out of it and loving it.
Yeah, and I can't remember if I said this in the episode, but I like the fact that this year has brought us movies as varied in terms of science fiction as 65 with Adam Driver and The Creator.
Yeah.
And obviously very different budgets, very different approaches, very different degrees of success. But I'm just like, I want more different stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want more stuff without a Roman numeral at the end of it, or colon subtitle at the end of it. I just want new ideas.
And I have to say, credit where credit is due, I suppose. I think it was before The Creator, but there was a bunch of trailers, and I'm only going to remember one of them now, but there was a handful of them, and I noticed that they weren't sequels or superhero or whatever. They were all these seemingly original stories. One of them was like a Tom Hardy motorcycle movie.
Oh, yeah. The Bike Riders.
Yeah, the Bike Riders. And I looked at my brother and I was like, I want to see that. I don't know what that is. Like that. I am compelled. Like, I don't know what that story is. And that makes
that one. I'm like, Jeff Nichols, sign me up. He's a director who, when he makes a movie, I'm interested.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wish I could remember more now. I wasn't prepared, but I was surprised to see a handful of original stories, up ahead. So that's exciting. I mean, and I want all of it. I still want the sequels and all that stuff, but I just want to know that all of it can exist.
Other stuff too.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the Bike Riders has been delayed indefinitely.
I know. It's such a bummer.
Because of the SAG strike. Yeah. So that was supposed to come out, I think, December 1st, but we'll see. I guess it comes out when it comes out.
Yep.
Here's a note we got from Adam O, who says he's been on a journey with our show, Brian.
Oh.
He says, gentlemen, as of a few months ago, I have become a member of a small, dare I say, elite fraternity of movie film completists. Is there a merit badge, t-shirt for the faithful? This is like summiting all the 14ers in Colorado, or hiking the Triple Crown, Appalachian Trail, Continental Divide, and Pacific Crest Trail, or circumnavigating the globe in a sailboat. My movie film quest began during those dark early days of COVID and carried me through the pandemic, kept me entertained during yard work, traveled with me on road trips, and occasionally-ish provided me with an excuse to ignore my family. Wow, he's listened to every episode, Brian.
Unbelievable.
As anticipated, this will be my final field report of The Magnificent Amberson and my dinner with Andre comparisons. These final two mentions come from commentary tracks. Initially, the commentary tracks didn't hold as much appeal to me as the regular episodes, but over time, they've become some of my favorite episodes.
Wow.
The Independence Day and Jaws commentaries are now part of my 4th of July tradition, as much as watching the movies are. Same goes for Home Alone, Die Hard at Christmas, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles for Thanksgiving. I also recently re-listened to the Ghostbusters and Tremors commentaries with my son on the to and back from a camping trip. Man, wow. That is...
I'm honored, honestly.
Seriously, that blows my mind. It really does. Adam continues, here goes, cue drum roll. Zachy very accurately and astutely notes that Mortal Kombat from 1995 is not, in fact, The Magnificent Ambersons. And let me just say, I stand by that. I don't care who I piss off. Here's where we're going to disagree. He also commented that Independence Day is not The Magnificent Ambersons, to which I say, how dare you, sir? Have you no decency? Let me say that compared to Independence Day 2, Independence Day is, in fact, Magnificent.
Right.
However, unlike some listeners, even Zachy extolling the virtues of communism and crapping on the grave of Bob Barker, or denigrating the classic Will Smith, Jeff Goldblum, and Bill Pullman joint. I'm not denigrating. I love that movie. Joint isn't enough to make me cancel my subscription. Once again, I just want to say thank you for the hours of entertainment, insightful commentary, and inspiration. Thank you, Adam, for that. Wow.
I love it. Referencing Jason Thorwald's message from...
clearly I burned some bridges. I was not dancing on Bob Barker's grave. I just said he probably welcomed the sweet release of death.
Who knew that would become like one of the markers for you? And this is like,
what's funny is just a week or so ago, my oldest kid, he was watching Happy Gilmore, and that movie is like his first exposure to Bob Barker.
I don't want a piece of you. I want the whole thing.
That's right. He's like, yeah, I saw Bob Barker. I was wondering why you were talking crap about him. I was like, I'm not talking crap about Bob Barker. So even my family has turned against me.
That's so funny. That's great. And wow, I am truly honored by all of that. I'm glad that, I mean, the commentaries are very, very different from our regular episodes. So I can understand if some are for some people, others, aren't for others. But I'm really happy to know that they can be entertaining on their own, and people enjoy listening to them while they do yard work or exercise. That's awesome.
It's very funny because the idea for the commentaries was initially like, oh, we'll just do this like whenever, it's just kind of if the mood strikes. And I think in the years since, it's become an excuse for us to talk to each other just as much as anything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And yeah, the most gratifying thing, because Adam said it and Dan said it, and I've heard other people say the same thing, where a lot of people will just be like, oh, it's a new episode in my feed, so I'll just listen to it, even if I don't know the movie, because it's a chance to just hear us bullshit with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what else can you say but like, thank you, right? Like, I mean, I just want to hear you guys talk.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around, to be honest. I mean, really, doing this show, I mean, it truly is like a phone call with you. Like, I feel like we're just chit-chatting, and sometimes I don't think about the fact that this goes out and is received, So when we get notes like that, it just makes it's so rewarding.
Well, and as it pertains to specifically like in the Line of Fire, I mean, honestly, I kind of love that we mix it up a little bit, and we do like a Air Force One, or like something that is much more of an era and much more, it's not Die Hard.
Well, it's like you want to hit those big ones that are touchstones for a lot of people, but I do love, that sometimes they reflect just our cinematic experience, right? The ones that hit us at a certain age, and so we feel like we have something we want to say about them. And
that's right.
And even deeper than that, when it isn't even with both of us, like when you wanted to watch The Phantom, I'd never even seen it, but it brought me into your world a little bit and your experience, and I got to sort of share in that, and it was fun to discuss that with you. So I'm happy that other people are having that experience.
It's funny that you mentioned The Phantom, because I rarely do this, but occasionally, every once in a blue moon, I'll just throw on one of our old ones just to refresh my memory about what we said. And I happened to listen to that right after we recorded our Mask of Zorro track, in which you and I mused about the film Dead Calm and whether it was directed by Martin Campbell or not. And then I put on The Phantom, starring Billy Zane, who starred in Dead Calm, in which you and I, in our commentary, muse about whether it was directed by Martin Campbell or not.
Oh, I don't remember
and
that.
I'm like, I think the both of us, we've got the retention of a goldfish, clearly.
Yes.
Like, we're having the exact same. Did Martin Campbell direct it? Let me look it up. No, it was Philip Noyce, like verbatim, twice in the span of 2 years. So
That is so funny. I love that it's about such a random fact.
That's right. Yeah. One last thing about our In the Line of Fire commentary. This is from Jeffrey Meisner, who says, this was an interesting deep cut choice for a commentary. I remember seeing this on video in 94, a good movie that seems to have been forgotten about in recent years. To which I say, Jeff, not by us. Damn it. We're gonna keep that sucker alive. How about some more deep cut Eastwood commentary tracks, say High Plains Drifter and The Eiger Sanction. And I say, hey, I'm down for all of it.
Me too. That is a big blind spot for me. Those old sort of spaghetti westerns. I've not seen them. Good, Bad, and Ugly. I haven't seen any of them.
We should definitely watch those.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. For Unforgiven, I'd love to do that just as an excuse to rewatch it. Like, yeah, I'm
Unforgiven. Well, you know what here, I'll just put this out there. I don't know if we'll get to it, but I would love this year. This is not Eastwood, but this year is the 30th anniversary of Tombstone.
Oh, dude, Federica, I know she listens to the show. She's probably laughing right now. I've been for over a year. I keep saying, like, I really want to rewatch Tombstone. I keep mentioning it. That's so funny. I'm dying to rewatch that. So yes,
Well,
absolutely.
let's pencil that in. Hopefully, that doesn't become another Last Jedi situation.
Last Jedi's Last Jedi. No, Tombstone. I'll be your Huckleberry any day, Zachy.
So that might be coming. So look forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for the comments about the commentaries. Really, that's just, like I said, very gratifying, and that's what keeps us going. That's why we're going to talk through Masters of the Universe one of these days, Brian.
I still cannot believe we haven't done that. I keep thinking we have. It was on TV the other day, and I watched like 10 minutes of it, and in my head I was like, I'm sure we've talked about this.
That is for sure. Like, it's just, I mean, we've got a long road ahead of us. There's a lot. I know we'll get there one of these days, because I think it'll be a fun 90 minutes.
Yeah. Oh man, those are the best.
Yeah. Let's take a short break. We got some headlines, and then we'll talk about some of the latest release in theaters right now.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
And we're back, and I just wanted to note some recent passings, Brian.
Yes. Yep.
In the last week, it's been kind of coming fast and furious, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Suzanne Somers passed away, first of all.
Yeah. That's
Age
another one of those weird
76.
ones from your childhood where you're like, oh, wow.
I mean, yes, because Suzanne Somers, I mean, I'm fairly certain you didn't watch Three's Company, like, first run.
First run, no. But I mean, those were definite, like, syndicated, like before school kind of TV shows.
Yeah, the syndicated reruns, and then of course Step by Step, which was first run, and you realize, like, in Step by Step she was like our age.
Whoa.
Right?
Weird.
Yeah. But definitely, yeah, like a TV fixture. I mean, if for the what was the thing, the exercise thing that she did?
The Thigh Master?
Thigh Master, there you go.
I mean, speaking of, like, for people who were around in the 90s, I mean, that was kind of iconic, honestly, the Thigh Master. Yeah. She's iconic. So
she was iconic, and it's interesting because of course she was arguably best known for playing Chrissy on Three's Company, and kind of the stereotypical dumb blonde character. But I mean, no doubt she elevated the role, But famously, she was fired from that show.
Yep.
And it's kind of interesting when you look at the dynamics at play there, where, like, the show continued on. Like, Three's Company did fine without her. So you say, okay, well, maybe she, the backstory, for those of you who don't know, is she, John Ritter was the star of the show, and then he played a guy who lives with two female roommates, Joyce DeWitt, Suzanne Somers, the brunette, the blonde, and hilarity ensues because this is the 70s where you can't have a man living with two women unless he's gay.
Right.
And so he had to pretend to be gay. What a weird premise for a show, Brian. As I'm articulating it,
I remember as a kid, I had no idea that was the premise. I was just watching the mix-ups and laughing, you know. And when I learned that was the premise, I was having the same reaction you're having right now. Like, what? Why? It makes no sense. Yeah, it was a different time, and I wasn't there for it. So
it's very odd. But you know, Suzanne Somers, who became, I mean, a sex symbol on the level of like Farrah Fawcett, you know, posters and the whole thing. So she was stumping for a raise and wanting something on par with John Ritter, and you can get into whether she should have been paid at the same level as him or whatever. But regardless, the network or the studio, they made the calculation that she was not needed for the show's success. And as far as the show goes, well, they were right. However, it says something that she didn't fade away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And the fact that it wasn't just step by step, but other things. And she, I mean, you know, she had taken on sort of icon status, which says something, you know?
Definitely. Yep.
I'll bet you thought I was going to kick dirt on her grave because
no, but you know, it's funny. When I see her, I immediately think of Three's Company, but I kind of forgotten about Step by Step, if I'm being honest. I mean, and when I was reminded reading about her, I was like, oh yeah, no, I watched that. I was like the prime demo for that. And I probably watched the whole series. It's amazing that show kind of faded from my mind.
Well, it is sort of fadeable.
I suppose. I mean, it was there in that sort of Full House era, sort of.
Yes. Well,
and it's just amazing how that one just lived on and Step by Step sort of didn't.
It's, you know, yesterday I texted you this graphic of the highest rated TV finales of all time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
The top 20. So, of course, number one is MASH with 105 million people, which I don't think our brains can even wrap around the idea of that many people all watching something that's not the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you talk about Full House. Well, that's number 18 with 24.3 million people.
Wow.
And I'm like, 24 million people were crowded around the TV, the individual TVs, not one TV, watching, you know, Michelle get amnesia or whatever the final episode is. It was something like that, you know? And I just, that just seems odd to me, right? Like,
it's hard to imagine. Yep.
Like 24 million people watched, again, Michelle recover from amnesia. And it was like, you know, 10 million people watched Breaking Bad. The final episode.
Right. When you put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. 3 million people watched the last Walking Dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you said it was like 18 million for the last Game of Thrones. Several million below the finale of Full House.
What's going to happen to Michelle? But Step by Step, I don't know if you remember this, that and Family Matters both got canceled at ABC, and then CBS picked both of those shows up.
I don't remember that.
And so like the final season of both of those shows was on CBS.
Huh.
And like on Family Matters, Harriet left halfway through that last season.
Oh, really?
So they recast Harriet for like 6 episodes.
Wow.
Which, like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
You know, the show's ending. Just pay her whatever and just, you know, have her finish it out.
Wow.
But, so Suzanne Somers, you know what I say about her leaving Three's Company, right? It's like you can say, oh, well, that was a dumb move or whatever. But I'm like, you know what? If you know what you're worth, get what you're worth.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. And like you said, she never went away.
She never went away. Yeah.
She knew what she had, and she believed in it, and she was right.
Yeah. And age 76, by the way, it's, I mean, that's older, but it doesn't feel that old, right?
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you realize
to cancer, I believe, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Another passage worth noting is Burt Young. Brian, Burt Young.
Yep. Paulie from the Rocky movies.
He just died this week at age 83.
Yeah.
And I should not this week, I meant this month, but again, Burt Young actually had a very lengthy career. Like the character actor's character actor. I mean, he played a particular type and he played it well. I remember him on Law and Order, as he was like a sex predator who was released and sort of, and it was actually a terrific performance. But I mean, sometimes you just find a role and that role defines you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, man, he played Paulie in 6 Rocky movies, and it's like that's his slice of immortality.
Yep.
He played a guy who probably did uncomfortable things with a robot.
I was gonna say, he is mourned by his robot wife. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the last time he played Paulie was in Rocky Balboa, which was 2006, right?
Uh-huh.
So that movie is itself now what 17 years ago now?
Yeah.
Crazy, right? Because think about this. The gap between Rocky 5 and Rocky Balboa was 16 years.
Wow.
So, which that felt like a long time back then, right?
Yeah, it did.
We're now further. I mean, granted, there's the Creed movies in the middle, but that's kind of doing its own thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one of the greats. In addition to the Rocky films, he was also in Transamerica, which was before Rocky Balboa. Last Exit to Brooklyn. He was in Mickey Blue Eyes, which that's not a good movie, but I remember him in it.
It's funny. There was all these mob comedies for a minute there.
Yeah, right. Mickey. Did you ever see Mickey Blue Eyes?
I feel like I must have, but I don't remember it.
That's one of those in one eyeball out the other, but pretty, Hugh Grant, James Caan, also gone, by the way, Gene Triplehorn. It's like a pretty stacked cast for a pretty forgettable movie.
And I mean, the whole selling point of that movie is like, foppish Hugh Grant saying, forget about it. Like trying to say forget about it. Like, that's like, there, you got your trailer. There's like, there's like 60 million. Like,
see, the thing about Paulie as a character, right? And this is what Burt Young brought. Paulie is a pretty vile, like he's this close to being the villain of those movies.
Yeah, which you kind of forget when you keep rewatching the later sequels more than the earlier ones.
Yeah, like even in the first one, I mean, he's horrible to Adrian.
No, that's what I mean. Like when you watch like Rocky IV and stuff, you're like, oh, he's like the lovable goofball or something.
Yeah, and then in the 5th one, he makes Rocky lose all his money. You remember that?
It's been a while, but yeah, I kind of remember that.
Bastard. But I think he made him endearing, which I think is the real trick.
Yeah.
Is you're like, yeah, he's a sister beating drunk.
Right.
But he's our sister beating drunk.
Right.
God damn it.
Right.
And I think that says something about what Burt Young brought to the table there.
And maybe ourselves. I don't know.
Perhaps. Yeah. I don't know what that says about us, but nothing good. Also, wanted to mention, this is just as of a couple days ago, Richard Roundtree has passed away. He is, of course, best known for being John Shaft in the 70s films, all the way up through and including a movie in 2019.
Wow.
Of course, he had played other memorable characters. He was also in Roots, the original miniseries Roots. But I think, if nothing else, just for Shaft, Richard Roundtree gets his place in the Hollywood Hall of Fame.
Shaft is really interesting, isn't it? I've never seen it, but even as a kid, I knew what it was. And it's just always sort of been there in the Shaft theme song, and damn right. It's just one of those things that has kind of never gone away, and it may not be as talked about as much as when we were younger, but like now, because I don't think the 2019 one did very well, but I don't know. We all knew what it was. It's kind of amazing legacy.
I think a couple points. I think you can't minimize the fact that Shaft was the first black action hero.
Right.
And, and that's like this huge thing that like you feel like it would get talked about more, right? Like, it's in the grand scheme of things, you don't get to a lot of these other characters without Richard Roundtree doing it first. But even when they decided to reboot it, right? And I remember when Sam Jackson first signed on, it was like, oh, Sam Jackson is playing John Shaft, but he's not that John Shaft, because that is Richard Roundtree, and it'll always be Richard Roundtree. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, he's Shaft's nephew. I think that's what it was in the 2000 movie.
Okay.
Right. And then in this one a couple of years back, they retconned it so that he's Roundtree's son, but in that one he's his nephew. But my point is, like, that was like the decision. Like, nobody can do what Roundtree did.
Right.
So Sam is going to play like this different energy because he's a different character.
Right.
And I think that says something about that. And, I was talking about this with my students the other day, because I was trying to contextualize in terms of, the blaxploitation genre, which I hate that term, but even though it's, that's what it's known as, but like calling it blaxploitation diminishes what many of those films accomplished, and the character of John Shaft, who was a confident private detective, he was kind of an anti-establishment figure, all of that stuff in terms of being empowering. I mean, think about how much that meant for the people seeing that, and it was the first time they had seen something like that.
Right. Like, getting to see like an African-American character who's getting the job done versus the person who's being pursued.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a legacy that, anybody can be proud of. Like, that's what I was like, Richard Roundtree had a very extensive filmography separate from playing Shaft. But even if it was just Shaft, that's still pretty, that's a great legacy to carry with him.
Definitely. Yeah.
With that said, we do have a new film release in theaters right now, Brian, and this is a 3.5 hour film. We will not have a 3.5 hour discussion about it.
Can't wait for the commentary, though.
Yeah. Hell. So, Killers of the Flower Moon. This is the new Martin Scorsese joint. Now, first of all, I have to ask, before we even get into it, how many bathroom breaks did you take?
Zachy, I don't know how. 0.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I did not get a drink. Usually I bring water or I drink a Coke or something. But yeah, this one I was like, nope, no water. So, and I did okay. You?
I went one time. And I was proud of myself for that because I'm like a multi-pisser during movies.
Oh, really?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know what it is, because it's not like I have bladder control problems, but something about the pressure of sitting in a movie theater and not wanting to pee, I get stuck in my own head.
You know what? I really do think there's something to that, because there was an era where I was having to pee always during the middle of a movie, and I was like, what is this? This has never happened before. And I'm like, am I just getting old? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
But I think I was in my head. And sometimes now, even with this one or with the Taylor Swift one or something, I'm like, dude, when you're working from home, like, you'll go hours without going to the bathroom. Like, you can do this. And then I just recently have not dealt with that.
Well, I may need to do some meditation or something like that. Post-hypnotic suggestion, something, because when I reserve my seat, I try to do it in such a way where if I have to go, I'm not inconveniencing anybody,
That is funny. I wasn't going to bring it up, but we have a friend that we regularly see movies with, and he is like at least once during the thing. And so because of that, we have like a section that's always on the aisle. And that's just become where I like watching movies now, because I've been doing it for years.
Now 3.5 hours, we're in Titanic. We're in James Cameron territory.
We're past Titanic.
Is it longer than Titanic?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And nary a sinking boat to be seen.
No. Yeah.
Or a Jake Sully abounding. So I think the fact that you didn't have to go to the bathroom in the theater speaks to the not going to the bathroom in the theater, leaving the screening room to go to the bathroom. I'm sure some people go to the bathroom in the theater.
They may. Howard Hughes did.
Well, I actually just rewatched the Aviator in the lead up to this movie. Actually, funnily enough,
how does that hold up?
I do like it, but I don't love it. I've never loved it, and I would say that especially in context of Killers of the Flower Moon, it feels even more kind of ordinary to me.
Yeah, it's kind of my memory of it, honestly.
I think it's funny because you watch Leo in this, and my thought with The Aviator is, as great of an actor as he is, and as great as he is in The Aviator, I think he was about 5 years too young in that movie.
Yeah. Which, going back to this movie, this was one of the first times I noted that he's aging.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I know he's been sort of done up to look a certain way, and I think he's wearing false teeth and stuff, but like, yeah, I was like, oh, he looks older here. You know,
but that said, I mean, this is the latest in a very fruitful creative partnership between DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese. Also a creative partnership between Robert De Niro and Scorsese, which lasts even longer.
Yep.
And man, this is a tough one. I really liked it, but it's one of those things where I'm having trouble sort of articulating all the stuff that worked for me, like in being coherent about it, because it's, at least me, I found it infuriating, which is by design, right? Yep. And so this definitely feels like one of the most overtly political movies that Scorsese has made.
Sure. Yeah.
But he's not making a statement. He's just like, this is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, by way of context, this is a film depicting a series of murders that occurred in Osage territory in the 1920s that happened in the aftermath of oil discovery on their reservation. And this, I knew about the Osage killings in a very broad sense. I'm curious, were you aware of the specific historical events?
Not really. No. Yeah.
So for me, the enjoyment of the film came from genuinely not knowing where things were headed. And while I certainly would not say the actual events are satisfying, because there's real people whose lives were lost, I will say the way in which Scorsese chose to approach the story, I found incredibly satisfying.
I appreciate everything you just said, because I think I feel the same way. Like, it's hard to say that I love this movie. But I did. I mean, I thought it was really well done in it's what it set out to accomplish, which is to just tell you that this happened, and so you, for 3.5 hours, I mean, how could you not? Like, you just get lost in it, you get immersed in it, and you exist in that time, and you meet some very unsavory people, and you have a front row seat to atrocities.
That's
and I guess in a way, I can't say that like I loved that, but like I was completely immersed in this. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch this stuff get carried out. But I also want to learn about, my nation's history. And so in a way, like I'm thankful that this story is being told, and it helps you to just add to your knowledge of, humanity and humanity's existence, and like the ugliness of it and the struggle of it. And so I think, like you said, it's not like he comes out and has some sort of like wrap up or moral or something, but it's just like, this happened, and like, this is worth knowing about. And that's what I left with. And so much so that I actually bought the book.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because I knew that the book was framed differently, because the book is about...
It's like a whodunit.
Kind of, yeah. It's about I'm already... In 2 days, I'm already 150 pages into it. I mean, I've been...
Oh, wow. Wow, okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of a mystery at first, and it's about the fact that this was the FBI's first case.
Yeah, that's right. How about that?
So that's a bigger part of the book, and it is... And it's worth noting, and I knew this when I was watching the film, and I had this going through my head a little bit, but it's worth noting that the first version of this movie, when it was set
Jimmy Stewart is in it.
Oh no, sorry, I meant this specific movie.
Oh, okay, because they've made this story before, which I had no idea about.
Right. I didn't either, but who's the guy? Eric Roth, I guess, and Martin Scorsese. The first version of this specific film was going to be from the point of view of the FBI guy, played by Jesse Plemons.
I see.
He was going to be played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and it was going to be a procedural. Like, this is happening, we don't understand it. Let's get to the bottom of it.
Wow.
Isn't it? And I guess it was. There's different accounts, but one of the accounts I read was that DiCaprio felt like, yeah, but where's the heart? Like, where's the heart of this story? Yeah. And so they flipped the perspective. So now it's about him and his wife, a Native American, an Osage character. And you are now on the other side of it. You know everything that's happening. It's not a mystery, right? And so you are sort of experiencing it through her eyes and through his eyes. And then this FBI guy becomes kind of an antagonist to DiCaprio at the end, threatening to reveal, his involvement in all this, which I thought was interesting. I mean, that's two completely different movies. One where you don't know what's going on at all, and you got to figure it out, and one where you know everything and you are existing with the villains the entire time, with the good guys hovering about. That's two wildly different movies.
And it's interesting because. The version as initially conceived and as exists in the book, based on what you're saying, I can imagine that movie, but it also seems very similar to something like Ghosts of Mississippi or something like that, where like it's the white person coming in and sort of solving the thing involving people of color.
Totally. I mean, excuse me. I think that. I think at the end of the day, I can see that movie and I can imagine it being a good movie. Yeah. But I think I did kind of prefer this longer existing with the people really at the heart of this story, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's just a different take. And I'm just repeating myself, but I think this was a good take to go with, because the relationships are so fascinating. Right. I mean, DiCaprio's character, Ernest, seems to really love his wife, which is just so confusing with what he's willing to do, like killing off her family members. And,
so that's kind of the most interesting thing, because, and I think this is like, the events, again, these are matter of historical record. So I actively chose not to read up on the history until after I watched the movie, because I just wanted to experience it. And so I had this sense of like trying to figure out Ernest, played by DiCaprio, and like wondering, like, is he going to have a face turn in this, And I think the twist, if anything, is that he doesn't. Not, he does, but not enough of a face turn to absolve him of the really horrific actions that he is responsible for.
Yeah.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love. Only at David's Bridal.
And just to finish that thought, I think that puts us in just to draw a comparison with Breaking Bad, by the end of the show, and this is where we're at now, it's, I as the viewer am like, man, how do I feel about Walter White?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's sort of what this movie forces you to do, is like, what do you think about this guy? Right. Like, you can have because people are people, you can have a character encompass multitudes but you still have to reckon with the horrific actions they've committed.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because, well, with Breaking Bad, I remember kind of like not approving of everything he did, but because we began the show with him, and the reason he got into this was because of his suffering. It's you are like on his side for longer than you should be, or at least I was. I was at least
I agree with
seeing things through his lens. And then it's funny because with Better Call Saul, he returns a couple times, or, you see snippets of him in other sort of media, and you're like, wow, that guy sucks. Like when you do not have that journey with him and you just see him behaving the way that he started to behave and treat people, and you're like, yeah, that guy sucks. And with this one, I've seen some criticism from some Native American people saying that they can appreciate the lengths that Scorsese went through to be authentic, but it's frustrating to see this story told kind of from the point of view of the villains. And I think
it's a valid critique.
I agree. I agree. It's a weird one for me, honestly, because I was never on his side. Like, I was always wanting Molly to figure this all out and everything. But at the same time, I have to admit that, yes, I was like kind of like with you, where I was trying to figure him out, and I wanted him to turn it around. I wanted him to get better. And I can see where that might be frustrating, knowing the whole story in advance and being like, you should be on his side ever, like,
right.
F this guy.
Well, and Brian, in that vein, if there's a critique, First of all, Lily Gladstone is a revelation of this movie. I think she should
so good.
She should just make room on her mantle for her statuette. However, I think the film does do her a disservice because she feels oftentimes like a passive participant in this story that is about her, but it revolves around her, but she, it doesn't flow from her decisions.
Yeah. And it's interesting in the book. It's told from different people's points of view. Like I think there's 3 sections to it. And the first section is very matter of fact. Like this, I mean, just because we're not in spoilers yet, but like this person was murdered. They were found here and this is all they knew about it. And this person was found here and they could only understand this about it. And then it ends with like a little bit of a teaser about Molly, where it's like, there's not really a record of how she felt about this or what she experienced. Like, there's no journal, there's no letters, there's no whatever. We actually don't really know. But what we do know is, something nefarious. I won't say it here, but something sort of nefarious going on that she didn't know about involving her. And then the second part of the book begins then with the FBI guy being called out and taking what we know so far and then trying to figure out who's at the root of it. But the difference in the film is we know from the start who's at the root of it.
That's right.
So I found that interesting because I felt the same way watching the movie, where I wanted more from her. I wanted more from her perspective. But the book even like calls out, like, we don't know.
That is interesting.
I mean, you can take some license. It's still a film and fill in some gaps from what you know about her. But yeah, anyway, all I had to say, I kind of agree. I would have liked to see more from her because she's fascinating.
She's a fascinating character. And honestly, the relationship with DiCaprio is very complicated, because there is that question. Well, did they love each other? And I think they did.
Yes.
And that's what makes everything that happened so much worse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Both of whatever they're experiencing is really fascinating. Like what he's willing to go through with, but still have these feelings for his wife, and for her, like knowing he's kind of a doofus, and then sort of even understanding that he might not be on the level, but she still seems to love him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I went with Amina, and I went with Mikko actually, and at 3.5 hours, man, and he was utterly, he was on board the whole time. So that says something, right? Like I feel like we don't give people enough credit, with all this like TikTok generation. You give people something compelling, They'll sit in one spot for 3.5 hours, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other thought I have is, as it pertains to the length of the film, I'm like, you can imagine the streaming miniseries version of this.
Totally.
Right? And I gotta say, I'm so glad this is not the streaming miniseries version.
Oh, man, me too. Yeah.
You know, because that's one thing I've realized is having to go to the bathroom notwithstanding. If I sit in a darkened room and I just get to take it in, I'm going to be so much more present
Mm-hmm.
than if I'm watching something at home. And you know, again, it's like if you make something compelling, people will show up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that's what this shows, and I think word of mouth, by the way, is going to be really good. But Amina was talking to me afterwards. She's like, why were these Native American women marrying these white guys?
Right.
Like, what don't they know that they're just after the money? And I was like, I mean, they trusted them. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? It's sad that that's a debit. You know what I mean? Like a personality flaw. They just trusted them.
I think there's that. And also the book goes into it a little bit more, but it's like they needed them as guardians because it touches on this in the movie, but some of these people were deemed not able to touch their own money.
Including Molly, right?
Including Molly. And so sometimes they would marry these people so they would have a quote unquote guardian who could then, you know, help them access their own money.
Amazing.
It's
what a racket, dude. It's like
I'm getting mad talking about it. Yeah.
It's like the system is stacked against them no matter what. Even when they find enough oil on their own land to make them the wealthiest people on the planet, the system is still stacked against them.
Yeah, the book goes into this detail where, you know, one person, I think it was Molly's mother, is given a hard time for how much money she spent on meat at a market. And yet there was this white guy who got really rich and he bought a mansion, you know, with like 22 rooms, and then he deemed it not big enough, so he abandoned it and built another one. And it's like, so that's what he can do with his money, but she's getting questioned about drawing more money after how much she spent on meat. You know,
well, and you've got one bit where Ernest, the DiCaprio character, is yelling at a mortician. He's like, "Why are you charging me Osage prices?"
Yes.
You know.
Yep. Because they're just like ripping them off just for like a casket, and I know they have the money.
The thing is that afterwards I did a little reading and I read up on William King Hale, who you know, that's the character Robert De Niro plays. And you talk about probably one of the most evil people who has ever existed on this earth.
It's just, it boggles the mind. I mean, the way that he was behaved like a friend to the Osage, you know, and how much they loved and trusted him. And he gave so much money to them for schools and all sorts of things. And you're like, and he's like the devil, you know, and he was just killing them all off, and just for what? He was already rich. You know, like and I mean, De Niro does an amazing job. I mean, he seems so, you know, and not knowing the story going in, but he does seem, and I knew he's the villain, but at the beginning he seems so warm to them, you know, and he's like officiating weddings.
Exactly. He's like, so-and-so, his name was, you know, he used to tell people his name was David, but I called him by his real name. And, you know, like, and he speaks the language. He speaks it fluently. And, you know, in our commentary track for Line of Fire, I was talking about the banality of evil. This is this guy, the banality of evil.
Yep.
Right. Evil wearing a nice suit and a bow tie. And just truly one of them. I mean, you just read up on this guy. You're like, this might be one of the most vile people who's ever existed.
Yeah. And there's, I know we're getting a little drop in details. We don't have to do the spoiler thing, but we'll get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of this if people want to pause and wait. But, you know, he has like this Osage friend, right? And they considered each other, at least spoke about each other as if they were their best friends. And then the next minute, he's just casually plotting his murder. Like it's hard. It's hard to wrap.
I mean, for the insurance money.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
He I mean,
I can feel myself getting worked up and angry.
Seriously, because if it was merely a screenplay, if it was merely a character in a screenplay, you'd be like, well, that guy is evil.
Yeah.
and thank God it's just a movie.
Yep.
But you're like, no, this is a real guy who really did this stuff and really didn't face any consequences for his actions.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. It was a sort of an interesting detail too. You know, they talk about how Osage sometimes will visualize an owl.
Yes.
Right. When death is close. And it's interesting how much he resembles an owl. You know, with his glasses.
Wow. How I didn't even think about that.
Even the book describes him as resembling an owl. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when you see pictures of the real guy, I mean, De Niro very much evokes the way they have De Niro trussed up in the movie. He looks very much like the real person.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that sense of putting the DiCaprio character in the catbird seat, so to speak, where it's like all these actions are sort of going through him and he's making these decisions. I mean, I think as a performance, I think it's a terrific performance from DiCaprio, you know, culminating in his breakdown in the prison when he gets some really horrific news. But again, it's the fact that it made me uncomfortable throughout is what I've been wrestling with. I'm like, well, that is by design, because Scorsese's trying to make the audience complicit in this. You know, and I have to wonder if, like, to some extent, this isn't a little bit of like, I wonder if this isn't a little bit of Scorsese being horrified at how many people watched Wolf of Wall Street and were like, Jordan Belfort, that's the guy to be.
Yep.
And being like, okay, let's try this again.
Right.
He's a bad guy, you know?
Yep. And sometimes, and that's what I kind of can appreciate too, is like, in real life, bad guys don't always just twirl mustaches and kick puppy dogs. You know what I mean? Like, they can have nice sides to them. And so you can be, you know, charmed by them occasionally, but like, what's at their core? You know, what are their actions? What are they doing? You know? And it's like, no, this guy sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then getting into the third half of it, you know, with the courtroom drama of it all. Well, actually, I wanted to mention this other thing, so I'll get into sort of talking about the filmmaking. But the scene where the mother passes away.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like, I think that should go in like top things Scorsese has ever done.
Yeah.
That was just so beautiful, and just the way it was. I mean, the sound design, it was kind of quiet, and it's just seeing, you know, people from her past, and she walks off with them is so gorgeous. But I was going to say, mixing the courtroom part of it and the filmmaking of it, I did appreciate when DiCaprio is confessing to everything at the end, how it's this really, really long shot on him that doesn't break, and we're just watching him confess to everything.
Right.
You know, it's just so compelling to watch, you know?
It's by the way, in the courtroom, were you like, hey, what the hell is Brendan Fraser doing here?
Yes. Yeah.
I definitely had that moment. I felt like both Brendan Fraser and John Lithgow, who are the opposing attorneys, just kind of came in and started playing cartoon lawyers.
That is really funny. We were talking about that afterwards, where we were like, it's hard not to go, hey, Brendan Fraser. You know?
Because he was like, I say, boy. You know, it was,
he has one of the best lines where he's like, you dumb boy.
Yeah.
That was so good. It's like what you've been wanting to say to him for so long.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things where I had a student ask, like, did it need to be this long? And I kind of went, I was like, I don't think so. I think you probably could have tightened it up a little bit, but sure. Like, first of all, nobody's going to tell Scorsese to tighten anything up. And I didn't regret the time, but I did feel that, honestly. I feel like, I don't know, it's probably like a 3-hour version. Like, cause this is me, you know, I think any movie over 2.5, let's say 2:15, you sort of go into overtime and you have to justify that length. So, and most, again, I think it works at this length, but there's elements that you probably could have trimmed a little bit, to make it feel, more compact. But again, I think the stuff that's in it it's all compelling. Like I don't,
yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I had that feeling too when I was watching it, and I didn't know if that'd be like an unpopular opinion, but I thought like, yeah, you probably could have gotten this just under 3 hours, and it might have been all the tighter for it. But at the same time, I didn't regret any of my time with it. It allowed me, like I said, the word that keeps coming to my mind is like immerse. Like I just was immersed in it, and I'm thankful for that experience. But I think you could have also had a tighter version of this as well. So, that might put some people off. It might bring more people in, like certain people. So I don't know. But I'm glad he got to make the version he wanted to make.
He made the movie he wanted. And I want to mention the bit at the end.
Yes.
Where in lieu of a black screen with white text that tells us what happened.
Yes.
Afterwards, I found this very novel, where we cut to a performance of like a FBI stories of the FBI radio show, like you would have heard in the golden age of radio.
Brought to you by Lucky Strike.
There, exactly.
Yep.
And you have, and essentially you have, just a recitation by the actors in this performance about what happened to all the various characters, and then culminating in Martin Scorsese himself reading the final piece about what happened to Molly when following the events of this film. Man, I think just as much as anything in the movie, that epilogue has stayed with me.
I thought it was brilliant.
Right?
Just absolutely brilliant. I loved it for so many reasons. Like you said, novel. I mean, novel is certainly a word for it, but I also found it so depressing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like this horrible thing that happened to all these people, like, almost like 30 people. I mean, we follow a couple of the murders, but it was like almost 30 people, maybe even more, were like murdered over this stuff, and reduced to this like radio show with someone doing like boing, boing, boing sound effects,
Mm-hmm.
and like,
Yep.
Like a white person doing like a stereotypical Native American voice.
Yep.
Like that's what happened to the story. Like I thought that's what I took away from it, was like how sad.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what did you feel about that? What was your sort of impression of, I mean, did you feel that was saying anything, or did you think that was just kind of an interesting way to do that versus the text? Or
Well, definitely that part, like, it's Scorsese trying to mix it up a little bit, right? Like I noted, for example, in The Aviator, that he doesn't do anything at the end. There isn't that thing of like, here's what happened to Howard Hughes afterwards, right? It's just, you're just in that movie. And so I was like, I feel like Scorsese is trying to avoid that trope as much as he can, right? But there's a fundamental injustice that, above and beyond what you're saying about just, these lives and these people are boiled down to this kind of, a radio distraction, right? But the injustice of the lives that these people led following the events of this film. Molly didn't make it past 50 years, and meanwhile, Satan's grandchild, King Hale, lived until almost 90. And and again, it's just it's you feel helpless. I did anyway, because you're like, this was from the moment settlers came to this country, the story of Native Americans is one injustice after another, and there's no recompense ever.
Right.
No restitution, no long arm of justice, no sense of the arc of the universe is long, but eventually things are made right. No, things were never made right for the Native Americans.
Right.
Even when oil is found under their feet, they're deemed unworthy of that oil on their own goddamn land.
And not just that. Yes, that, but also it was like this really crappy land that wasn't good, like no good grass for animals or anything.
Yeah.
Like they were forced onto this crappy section of land, and it just happened to have this oil underneath. So it's like they were already shoved to a place that they, people thought wouldn't even be that great. Like, I'll just let them live in this crappy area. And then it turns out to work out for them, but they won't even allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. When it was over, I want to bring up one more moment. The moment when Molly asks Ernest if there was anything in the insulin.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Amazing. And then him just, he lies. She knows it. She leaves. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think just fundamentally that sense of like what, I mean, it's just like, how can you do this to another person, much less somebody you profess to love? I mean, it's just, you keep coming back to that,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, the fact that we're having a conversation like this, where we are getting just enraged as we're talking. I mean, to me, that says that Scorsese accomplished his goal. And I mean, I think there are legitimate critiques to be had. We address some of them. I don't think this is, a quote unquote perfect movie. I think there's issues, but me personally, I don't think any of those issues is enough to take away from what I think is a very thought-provoking and just as important, engrossing film about a real life injustice that almost nobody knows about.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a thing that's going to draw a lot of eyeballs towards that history. And I think that's an incredibly important thing to do.
Couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Yeah. It's definitely a success for me. I mean, I feel I bristle at saying that I liked it, because it's so hard, but like, I definitely think this was a success, and I think it's worth watching.
Well, there we go. I think that about sums it up. We didn't even need to delve too deeply into spoilers, although, I think your point earlier was well taken, that if you're trying, if tread lightly, if you are planning to watch it.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good place to wrap up this discussion. What do you say?
Yeah, man, I really enjoyed talking about this with you.
Yeah, likewise. It's definitely like, I'm glad that I had a couple of days to sit with it, because I was allowed to let it percolate in my mind. One thing I did want to mention, by the way, Jesse Plemons is so terrific in this movie. And it's so funny because I'm watching him in Breaking Bad, and boy, howdy, is he a dirtbag in the last.
Yeah.
Boy, you just want Jesse to choke the living shit out of him, right?
Yes.
And seeing him in this, where you're like, oh, thank God Jesse Plemons is here. Like,
it's so funny. Yeah, I think my brother said something about when he appeared. He's like, oh, good. Like, he's in good. Like, he's in good movies. Like, he's just one of those guys.
Oh, I think, you know what? I can't remember if I said this on the show, but to me, Jesse Plemons is like the closest. To me, he evokes like Philip Seymour Hoffman energy.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
Where you put him in, you're going to get a good performance out of him,
Yep.
But we'd love to hear your thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon. So if you have any feedback on our responses, or just, anything you want to say about it, you can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast. Message us there. If you're looking for me, you can find me online at most social media. I'm at Zacky's Corner, so you can find me there. And of course, my writing is at The Wrap and IGN and the San Francisco Chronicle. I've got some fun reviews coming up in the weeks and months ahead. But Brian, what about you?
Well, you can find episodes I've written for Young Jedi Adventures on Disney Plus and Disney Junior. And coming up on November 8th, there's a whole new batch of episodes dropping. So that's really exciting.
Nice. Very cool. And as always, if you like what we're doing, please go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, leave a star rating, let people know what you think, because that's what spreads the word, and that's what helps us out. So we haven't gotten any new reviews in a little while, but if you're feeling that urge, we'd certainly appreciate that ever so very much. But with that, we do have a commentary track coming up soon. I'm not going to say what it is, but hopefully it'll be one that people enjoy, whether they've seen the movie or not. As we discussed earlier. But regardless, we got lots of fun stuff to talk about as we head into award season movies. And I know that's a time of year that you and I have started to enjoy a lot more lately. So got some fun stuff to talk about there. But with that, on behalf of my partner, Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been Movie Film 278. Wow. That's a lot of episodes. We'll be back soon. Thanks, everybody.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love. Only at David's Bridal.